Finally forced out. The former prince, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has officially left Royal Lodge and will live in a home on Sandringham Estate in Norfolk.
The gates of Royal Lodge have seen over 2 centuries of royal history, but nothing, absolutely nothing, hits like what's going down behind those walls right now. This isn't just another quiet royal chapter. This is chaos at the highest level. A prince stripped of everything. A king pushing out his own brother, and a legendary residence turned into a full-blown battlefield. This is shaping up to be the biggest royal meltdown since World War I. No exaggeration. You think you know the story. Wait till you hear what's really happening, because what's coming next could shake the monarchy to its core. Now picture this for a second. A 30-room mansion sitting in one of the most elite spots in Britain. What would you do with that kind of power? For Prince Andrew, this wasn't a fantasy. This was everyday life. For more than 2 decades, Royal Lodge wasn't just some fancy house. It was a symbol of status and privilege, a Grade 2 listed Georgian masterpiece tucked inside Windsor Great Park, shining like a crown jewel. We're talking 30 stunning rooms, 7 massive bedrooms, a sunken garden so perfect it could make professionals jealous, a private chapel, a swimming pool, even an aviary. And it doesn't stop there. 6 separate lodge cottages, plus housing just for security officers. This place wasn't just luxury, it was next-level living. But here's where things get deeper. This mansion wasn't just about wealth. It carried serious royal history. Queen Elizabeth herself spent part of her childhood within those very walls. Princess Margaret ran through those halls as a kid. The Queen Mother lived there until 2002. So when Andrew moved in back in 2003, this wasn't just a move. It was like stepping into legacy itself. And the deal he locked in, people called it the deal of the century. A 75-year lease running all the way to June 15th, 2078. The upfront cost, £1 million. Sounds big, right? But the yearly rent? This is where it gets wild. Something called peppercorn rent if demanded. If you've never heard of that, let me break it down. Peppercorn rent basically means symbolic payment. Almost nothing. That's right. Andrew was living in a multi-million-pound estate for practically free. And then, in 2008, his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson moved in too, a divorced couple living together in royal luxury. People were definitely talking. Still, somehow, they made it work for nearly 20 years. It was unusual, it raised eyebrows, but it stayed solid, at least on the surface. From the outside, this setup looked untouchable. Andrew had his lease locked in, his status, his address. Everything seemed secure, but then everything flipped. Fast forward to 2024, and the mood in Britain was completely different. The country was dealing with a brutal cost of living crisis. Regular families were struggling just to get by, choosing between heating their homes or buying food. And then the public finds out that Prince Andrew, already surrounded by controversy and no longer active in royal duties, is basically living rent-free in a mansion worth millions. You can already feel the anger building, right? The backlash was instant and intense. People were furious, and they weren't staying quiet about it. Meanwhile, King Charles had already been working behind the scenes, trying to convince his younger brother to downsize. He even suggested Frogmore Cottage, something smaller, more appropriate for someone no longer representing the crown. But Andrew wasn't having it. In his mind, the lease was solid, legally protected, untouchable. He wasn't going anywhere, or at least that's what he thought. Then came the moment that poured fuel on the fire. Virginia Duffy's memoir dropped in 2024, and it hit hard. It dragged Andrew's past controversies right back into the spotlight, especially his connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Suddenly, the pressure on King Charles went through the roof. The public wanted action, not silence. The reputation of the monarchy was on the line, and something had to break. And break it did, on October 30th, 2025. That day changed everything. Imagine Buckingham Palace releasing a statement so shocking that it spread worldwide in minutes. His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and honours of Prince Andrew. Let that sink in. A king stripping his own brother of royal status. This wasn't just rare, it was historic. You'd have to go all the way back to 1917 to find anything even close. When Prince Charles Edward lost his title during World War I, this wasn't just a big move, it was a massive shift. The statement didn't hold back either. Prince Andrew would now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. No more His Royal Highness, no more Duke of York, just Andrew. And then came the real shocker. He was officially ordered to give up Royal Lodge and move out to private accommodation. Just like that, the 75-year lease he trusted was gone. The peppercorn rent deal, finished. But what made this even more intense was the message behind it. The palace made it clear. They stood with the victims. The king and queen wanted the public to know they cared deeply about those affected by mistreatment. That statement hit hard because it showed exactly where they stood. And it wasn't with Andrew. Now the clock was ticking. Andrew was given 12 months to leave, with a deadline set for October 2026. But insiders revealed something even more telling. King Charles wanted him out much sooner, ideally by Easter 2025. That urgency raised serious questions. Why the rush? What was pushing the king to act so fast? At the same time, the fallout was spreading. Sarah Ferguson lost her Duchess of York title, and reports say she was crushed by it. She leaned on her daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, trying to handle the situation. And then came another big question. Would Andrew get compensated for all the money he put into renovating Royal Lodge over the years? Millions had been spent. After all, the Crown Estate stepped in to assess everything, but what they found shocked everyone. Because when the moving process started in late 2025, something unexpected came to light. Vans began showing up, and slowly stories started leaking out. And they all pointed to one thing: a hoarding situation. Multiple insiders used the same word: hoarder. Room after room, packed to the ceiling, with documents, photographs, and belongings collected over decades. This wasn't just clutter, it was overwhelming. What should have been a simple move turned into a full-on excavation project. One insider even said, "The clutter at Royal Lodge is turning what should be a straightforward move into a months-long, room-by-room excavation." Another added that even if Andrew wanted to leave immediately, he couldn't. Not with the massive amount of stuff that needed sorting. And that reveals something deeper. This wasn't just about mess. This was about mindset. A man who stepped back from royal life in 2019, slowly becoming more isolated, holding on to pieces of his past. Documents, photos, memories. Everything stacked up like he couldn't let go. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. The situation quickly became a logistical nightmare. King Charles had hoped for a fast transition, but this changed everything. The clearing process dragged on, pushing timelines further and further. Storage units had to be arranged, decisions made on what to keep or throw away. Every single room needed careful attention. And then came the final twist. After all the inspections, all the evaluations, the Crown Estate reached a conclusion that stunned everyone. Despite the £1 million upfront payment and millions more spent on renovations, Andrew would likely receive zero compensation for leaving early. Why? Because the property didn't meet the required standards under the lease agreement. Just like that, everything he thought he had secured slipped away. The damage inside Royal Lodge was catastrophic, and it wiped out any hope Andrew might have had for compensation. The deterioration, the hoarding, the years of neglect, they all combined to leave him with nothing. He was about to lose everything and walk away empty-handed. And then came the news that left royal watchers speechless. Marsh Farm, Andrew's new home, or rather, what would become his new home, was revealed. And it was a shock to everyone paying attention. Marsh Farm sits quietly in Wilton, about 2 miles west of Sandringham House, a small working farm that had been unoccupied for years after the previous tenant passed away. Those who had glimpsed it described it as run-down, weathered, and significantly in need of repair. To put it bluntly, Andrew was going from the grandeur of 30 rooms in a Georgian mansion with private chapels, a swimming pool, aviary, sunken gardens, and multiple outbuildings to a property that could barely fit him comfortably. This modest farmhouse demanded extensive renovation before it could even be considered livable. The contrast couldn't have been starker, and it wasn't lost on anyone. Sources revealed an even more shocking detail. Andrew never wanted Marsh Farm in the first place. His sights had been set on Wood Farm, Prince Philip's former retirement home. It was larger, more comfortable, and closer to Sandringham House. But that option had been denied, deliberately, because placing Andrew too close to the family during high-profile events, like Christmas gatherings, was seen as risky. That 2-mile gap wasn't accidental, it was strategic, a buffer zone meant to isolate him and limit his interactions with the family. Richard Fitzwilliams, a respected royal commentator, put it plainly: keeping Andrew at Sandringham was as much about control as it was about relocation. By January 2026, the move had begun in earnest. Construction crews arrived at Marsh Farm, working tirelessly in rain and winter chill to prepare the property. Fences were repaired. A new 6-foot barrier replaced old barbed wire. CCTV cameras went up, and integrated surveillance systems were installed. But even as improvements were made, the challenges kept piling up. There was no suitable garage for his luxury vehicles, no permanent space for live-in staff. The king arranged for a cleaner, groundsman, and cook to travel from Sandringham, but only on an as-needed basis. For a man who had spent his life surrounded by staff attending to every detail, the psychological impact of this sudden dependency was immense. Andrew had never managed a household alone. He grew up in Buckingham Palace, where every need was anticipated and catered to. Now he was facing a new reality, relying on help that arrived according to someone else's schedule, navigating a space smaller and far less accommodating than what he had known. Sources observed that it was a major adjustment. "It's a lot," one insider said. "A lot smaller, a lot less luxurious than Royal Lodge." Another added, "He hasn't lived anywhere this small since leaving his apartment at Buckingham Palace, and even then, he had free roam of the building and grounds." And then came news that sent even more shockwaves through royal circles. Marsh Farm sits on a floodplain. A flood risk assessment from 2024, conducted for nearby areas by Wolfer and Barnes, explicitly warned that the Environment Agency operates a flood warning system to protect properties and residents in the event of flooding. This wasn't theoretical, it was real, documented and officially recognised. If the nearby pumping station failed due to mechanical breakdown or power disruption, Marsh Farm would be directly at risk. The emergency plans involved temporary pumping equipment and staff intervention, but even those measures weren't foolproof. Andrew's safety could literally depend on a system that might fail at any moment. The timing made it even more dramatic. Storm Chandra battered Britain with ferocious winds and relentless rain, just as these environmental risks became public knowledge. At Sandringham, King Charles had to shut down the children's play areas because conditions were too dangerous. Royal watchers observed in real time how vulnerable Marsh Farm could be, the flood risks suddenly coming to life under extreme weather conditions. The questions followed immediately. Had these risks been properly assessed before the decision to relocate him? Did King Charles know about the vulnerability? And if so, why choose a property with such clear hazards when other, safer options existed? Some commentators even suggested a deliberate strategy behind the choice. Perhaps the discomfort was intended to encourage Andrew to consider leaving the United Kingdom altogether. Security added another layer of complexity. Marsh Farm, unlike Royal Lodge, had none of the established infrastructure. No surrounding walls, no strategic location within protected grounds. Authorities had to extend the Sandringham no-fly zone to cover Marsh Farm after drones had been spotted in the area during a high-profile visit by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in March 2025. The new legislation came into effect in September 2025, weeks before Andrew's titles were formally stripped. proving that his relocation had been carefully planned well in advance. This wasn't a last-minute decision, it was orchestrated. The official order stressed that the air restrictions were necessary for public safety and security, yet experts still questioned whether Marsh Farm could ever approach the level of protection Royal Lodge offered. Its rural isolation, 2 miles from Sandringham House, made any rapid response difficult. Environmental hazards, security vulnerabilities, logistical complications, all combined to make the property a challenge far beyond what Andrew had experienced in decades of royal life. Adding to this, sources revealed that King Charles would fund Andrew's accommodation and security privately, not through public money. That represents a significant ongoing expense, emphasizing the seriousness of the move and the level of control involved. It wasn't just about punishment or isolation, it was a careful, managed, and sustained effort to restructure Andrew's life in real terms, with real consequences for comfort, convenience, and independence. Even beyond logistics, Marsh Farm symbolizes a complete shift in Andrew's lifestyle and autonomy. Gone were the endless rooms, the sprawling gardens, the full household staff. In their place was a modest, isolated farmhouse with practical constraints, environmental risks, and dependencies that highlighted his new, circumscribed existence. The property forced him to confront reality in ways he hadn't before, from managing daily life in a smaller space to navigating security and flood risks, elements he had never had to consider in Royal Lodge. And so, Marsh Farm stands today as more than just a house. It's a reflection of a broader strategy, a relocation that underscores the limits of royal privilege, the importance of family oversight, and the practical realities of life outside the main circle of influence. Every detail, from distance to staffing, security, and environmental hazards, was calculated to reinforce Andrew's new status and autonomy, or lack thereof. It's a place that demands adjustment, patience, and constant awareness of limitations, a tangible reminder that no title guarantees comfort or immunity. Through all of this, one fact remains. Marsh Farm, 2 miles from Sandringham House, in a rural, isolated location, presents challenges that are difficult to overcome. Rapid response to any emergency is complicated by distance, environmental risks, and infrastructure limitations. And even with the King's private funding for accommodation and security, the move represents an ongoing, complex, and highly controlled chapter in Andrew's life, highlighting just how dramatically his circumstances have changed. It's an irony almost too stark to believe. From a practical standpoint, it might have been far more cost-effective and far simpler to allow Andrew to remain at Royal Lodge. Security was already established there, the infrastructure was already in place, and the royal household would have spared itself an enormous logistical and financial headache. But the choice to move him was made, and the consequences of that decision are only now beginning to ripple through the royal family, the public, and those who follow the inner workings of the monarchy. At the centre of all of this was one relationship that had seemed unshakable, a bond that appeared to weather every scandal, every storm, every moment of public scrutiny. Andrew's connection with his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. Through decades of ups and downs, through headlines that would have shattered ordinary friendships, Sarah had stood firmly by him. She had lived at Royal Lodge since 2008, developing a closeness that some described as almost familial. She had defended him in public when the world seemed eager to condemn him, shielded him from criticism, and maintained a delicate balance between her loyalty to Andrew and her own life. But even loyalty, it seems, has limits. In January 2026, exclusive reports sent shockwaves through royal watchers. Sarah Ferguson would not be accompanying Andrew to Marsh Farm. Sources confirmed that both Andrew and Sarah were required to leave Royal Lodge by the 25th of January. The woman who had stood by him for decades, who had endured public scrutiny and private scandal alongside him, had chosen her own path. She would not move into Marsh Farm, the isolated farmhouse on the Sandringham estate, after losing her Duchess of York title and facing a future marked by uncertainty. Sarah's decision to step away was not abrupt, but deeply calculated. She sought support from her daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, and made plans to establish herself independently in Windsor rather than join her daughters in the Cotswolds. This marked the final chapter in a remarkable post-divorce relationship. For nearly 30 years, Sarah and Andrew had maintained a unique bond, blending friendship, co-parenting, and mutual understanding in ways that few could imagine. Their separation at Marsh Farm would be symbolic, not just of physical distance, but of the broader isolation Andrew was about to face. The absence of Sarah Ferguson was more than an emotional blow. It was a practical one. She had been his companion, his confidant, someone who understood the pressures of public life and the unique demands of royal existence. Her presence offered a buffer, a stabilizing force in a life otherwise dominated by expectation, scrutiny, and protocol. Without her, Andrew would enter Marsh Farm profoundly alone, navigating an environment that was alien, untested, and devoid of the networks and support he had relied upon for decades. And then there's the question of what exactly Andrew was losing. At Royal Lodge, he had a level of privacy, autonomy, and comfort that few could imagine. A private swimming pool offered secluded exercise, an aviary allowed him to care for birds in a world of his own making. The sunken garden, cultivated over years, provided both beauty and solitude. The Royal Chapel of All Saints gave him a space for private worship without intrusion, while 6 lodge cottages accommodated staff and visiting guests, and specialised buildings housed gardeners, security personnel, and police staff integrated into the estate infrastructure. The logistics of daily life were seamless. Assistance was constant, immediate, and invisible. At Marsh Farm, all of that disappeared. Live-in staff would no longer attend to his every need. Any help he received would be limited, ad hoc, and controlled by the schedule of Sandringham staff. Suitable garaging for his luxury vehicles would be absent, and basic conveniences that defined his daily life were stripped away. The very independence, autonomy, and dignity that had once been taken for granted were gone. Friends described his reaction as profound. The phrase that captured it best was, "He really didn't want Marsh Farm." Yet the eviction was absolute. Royal experts noted that King Charles's decision to relocate Andrew to Marsh Farm sent a message not only to Andrew, but to the wider public. Titles, privileges, and royal status are inseparable from expectations. Failure to uphold responsibilities results in consequences, swift and permanent. This was not simply about housing, it was about behaviour, reputation, and control. Marsh Farm, commentators increasingly concluded, represented a deliberate strategy of geographic and social isolation. The farmhouse, 2 miles from Sandringham House, was far enough to prevent unplanned encounters with other royals, yet close enough that Andrew could still be monitored. The rejection of Wood Farm, which Andrew had requested, made the calculation clear. Proximity to the family was a risk, and buffer zones were essential. Social isolation extended beyond geography. While Royal Lodge in Windsor had provided decades of established connections, Marsh Farm was a rural area where Andrew had no existing relationships, no local support network, and limited access to the resources he once relied upon. The social consequences were immediate. At age 65 or 66, Andrew would be starting over in a new environment, far from his daughters, who had been a stabilizing presence in his life. Friends speculated that the move might ultimately push him toward leaving the United Kingdom, perhaps relocating to the Middle East, where established business contacts and less intense public scrutiny could offer an alternative life, one in which his scandals might not follow him as relentlessly. Connections in Dubai and the UAE could provide opportunities for reinvention outside the shadow of the monarchy, a reality that royal experts deemed both possible and increasingly likely. Then came another revelation. Marsh Farm might not even be a permanent home. Reports in mid-January 2026 suggested that the farmhouse could serve only as temporary or interim accommodation while further renovations were carried out, or while another property was prepared for Andrew. After decades of stability, comfort, and privilege, Andrew's new life might be defined by impermanence. The very idea that Marsh Farm, with all its extensive renovations and security investments, might be a transient stop was both ironic and devastating. This uncertainty raised profound questions about King Charles's intentions. Was Marsh Farm a genuine exile, or merely a temporary holding solution until longer-term arrangements were made? The extensive improvements to the property, security fencing, CCTV, structural renovations, suggested a commitment beyond the temporary, yet describing the farmhouse as interim allowed Andrew to accept the move without losing hope entirely. It was a strategic way to soften the blow, a means of presenting a reasonable short-term solution while keeping options open for future adjustments should circumstances change. Health, security, environmental hazards, or public opinion could all influence whether Marsh Farm remained viable as a home for Andrew. Ultimately, Marsh Farm represents more than inadequate housing, flood risks, or enforced isolation. It symbolises the fundamental instability and uncertainty now defining Andrew's existence. He has gone from being a prince with a secure home and defined responsibilities to a man stripped of titles, reliant on his brother, with a temporary residence and a future that may shift at any moment. His very presence in the United Kingdom is no longer guaranteed. Marsh Farm is not simply a smaller house, it is a tangible reflection of diminished status, uncertainty, and precarity. From 30 rooms to a modest farmhouse, from peppercorn rent to dependence on royal charity, from defined royal duties to uncertain exile, Andrew's life has been fundamentally transformed, and the ultimate question remains: how will Andrew respond? Will he quietly accept his exile, fading into obscurity at Marsh Farm, or will he fight back, legally or publicly, creating a spectacle that threatens the crown? Might he publish interviews, memoirs, or revelations that shake the monarchy to its core? Could he leave the United Kingdom entirely, placing himself beyond the family's control? King Charles has taken unprecedented action against his own brother, but the stakes could not be higher. A disgraced, isolated prince with nothing left to lose, stripped of titles, facing environmental hazards and living under temporary conditions, represents a singularly unpredictable factor within the royal family. Every move, every decision now carries risk, both for Andrew and for the crown itself. Which aspect of Andrew's eviction shocks you the most? Is it the flood risks, the hoarding crisis, Sarah Ferguson stepping away, or the revelation that Marsh Farm may be temporary? And how do you feel about King Charles's handling of the situation? Could he have approached this differently, or was this the only way to enforce accountability and control? Your perspective matters. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Engage with this story, because this saga is far from over, and each new development could reshape the monarchy in ways few of us can predict. If you're captivated by royal intrigue and the ongoing drama surrounding Andrew's future, take a moment to like this video, leave your comment and subscribe so you never miss an update. Share it with friends who love royal stories, because the events unfolding at Marsh Farm are just the beginning. Trust us, the Crown has never faced anything quite like this. How it resolves could change the monarchy forever, and you'll want to witness every twist and turn. Click on the next video for even more exclusive insights and explosive royal revelations. You won't want to miss what happens next, because the story of Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor, is only getting started.